Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Harry News. Kia ora, Chewy.
Kia ora, Pat. How are we doing?
I'm good. I'm wearing my new hoodie. This is a Queenstown purchase.
I'm wearing. God, I always have with the camera reversed. Look, I'm wearing. It's over on this side here. Look. Emerson's did a St. Patrick's Day T-shirt.
I was going to say it's Irish. It's Irish flag.
Yeah. Was out for a work day last night and was trying the beverage, and it was very nice. And then I saw the T-shirt and I was like, that design rules. So nice. I made an impulse purchase.
Yeah, well done, you. I sort of said this last week, but I recently, this tree picked up a little EV. Been looking at them for a long time. Finally had to do an upgrade. Picked up a little EV, and had a huge amount of fun driving to. It's a new experience. Everything you hear about EVs when they say, "Oh, you'll turn up to your destination more relaxed," and yada yada yada, all true. Dunedin to Queenstown felt like the trip was half the length it used to be. The adaptive cruise control and that, I'm preaching to the choir, I know, but I did that. But what I was going to say is I've still got my old massive gas guzzling thing that I'm in the process of selling now, and because I've still got it, that currently is the dog's car. So when I go to the park, I go in that car rather than the new purchase. And I got in it today. It was the first time I've driven it since being away for the weekend. Far out. Heavy steering, noisy, like I couldn't believe it. It's obviously it's all power steering, but just the difference in steering, it is almost like learning to drive a completely different thing, even though they're both cars. So yeah, it's interesting watching that. I thought we could do a giveaway here. We could give my old car away. No, I'm going to sell it.
I had a similar experience actually, because we've still got my wife's car because she hauls around her paints and everything in it, so it's absolutely trashed. But I had to move it the other day, and so got it. And it's the first time I've been in a petrol vehicle and or driven that car for months and months and months, and it was just like the same sort of thing. It's like that spin up for power, the noise, the smell, all of that sort of thing. It was quite jarring. I didn't think it would be, but it certainly was.
Yeah, I drive. Where we drive up to the dog park up in the north of Dunedin, go up that way, and so it's only a 7-minute drive from my house. I was surprised that the steering felt so heavy, because obviously it's power steering still, and the whole car just lumbered compared to that instant when you hit on the even if you're not trying to go fast, even if you're in eco mode, just the instant versus the kind of sluggish. And like the thing that my old one is a 3-litre V6, so it's not sluggish, but the difference, and the EV that I got is not considered a fast EV, but compared to the V6 3-litre, it feels sluggish. The 3-litre, it's crazy. So listen, interesting show tonight. We're going to be covering on some of the stuff that we didn't talk about last night because there's so much in the news, and some other bits and pieces as well. I'm actually going to play you a story from last week tonight, mostly because I missed it, and it is a phenomenal piece of commentary by someone called Jazz Thornton. If you know her work, people, you'll know what she's about. If you don't, we'll introduce you to her. And so that'll be coming up tonight with a bunch of other stuff. So also, I want to say huge thanks to our patrons. And there's a very interesting stuff going on at the moment, Chewy. We've had 4 patrons sign up today. And 4 is quite a lot for a singular day. I mean, it might not sound like a lot when you think about it.
Who's been talking?
Well,
who's been telling people?
I just wonder... I know we're not competing with them, and I don't want to kind of use the fear like they do, but people hear about these media companies, including RCR, like Independent, falling over, TVNZ, Newshub, and maybe people have gone, I guess we need to just make sure these boys stay around. I just wonder, I'm not doing that as a pitch, but it's just interesting to have 4 people sign up today, the day after a whole bunch of those announcements happen. So thank you for being a part of what we do. We appreciate it, all of our beautiful people. SB down here, SB signed up today as a producer. We appreciate you signing up, SB. And over on our last page, we've got Rick Haywood in the fuel level. We've got K-Bat, we've got James Riley in the patron level. So thanks, team. And once again, as I've said numerous times before, if this weekend where there will be a meetup. Remember, I'm going to do that tonight. I've written myself. Look, I literally, Chewy, before we started, I'm even seeing red up the top there. It says meet up. I literally remembered I haven't sent that email out yet, so I've written it on my thing to do probably after the show tonight. So if you're a paid patron, then you'll have a chance to come online at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning and hang out and say good day. And there's a bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about this weekend, kind of whānau stuff. Now, you are all whānau who are watching and being a part of what we do by that, but, our patrons are maybe everyone's cousins, but patrons kind of are brothers and sisters. Does that make sense? I don't know. So they come along and help us to make some decisions, and I've got a few things to talk about this weekend should you want to meet up. And remember, we have the meetups. For some of the levels there's merch, but everyone gets early access to our Patreon page, and you'll see from yesterday, this was Dr. Greg Treadwell, that was up there about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So early access to things that we do as pre-records and other bits and bobs as well. So thank you, patrons, for being a part of us, for really being inside us in any way you like. Is that a good way to say it, Chewy? No, we won't go there. Okay.
All up in our guts.
All up in our guts. Patreon.com/Big Hearing News is how you can be a part of that, should you be interested. Righty-ho. Where to go? I think it probably appropriate that we start with, certainly in the world of media, possibly the biggest news story of the day. Let's have a look at the confirmed closure of Newshub.
Good evening. It's the end of the news as we know it. In a meeting with staff this morning, Three's owners, Warner Brothers Discovery, confirmed the closure of our news service, Newshub, with the loss of nearly 300 jobs and more than half of them from the news team.
Our last bulletin's been inked for Friday, July the 5th, after which the media landscape will be dramatically different, with TVNZ today confirming the cancellation of its current affairs programme Sunday. Laura Tupou has the story.
Media addressing the media after confirmation of the worst for Warner Brothers Discovery employees. 150 of those roles are from news.
Companies come and go, but it's he tangata, it's the people who...
Yeah, companies come and go, but 35 years of news broadcasting in a country with only really one other television news option. It's more than just a company, and I know Mike's talking about the people, which is right because he's a part of it, but for the rest of the country, this isn't just a company. This is a keyhole into news dissemination and into the political world and into... So yeah, this is not just a company. Whether you love them or hate them or you think they're biased or whatever it is, no matter what, it's still a place for New Zealanders to have news disseminated to them. And we are going to be left with one news outlet. And for the people who have been dancing on the graves of Newshub today, I got to say, you should now be more concerned than ever. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but how much less does TVNZ now have to put into things seeing they have no competition? Like, having the competition is one of the things that keeps people honest. Not having the competition means that an entity, and I won't say TVNZ because I wouldn't expect them to do this, but if you don't have the competition, then that gives an entity not necessarily the pushback and the drive, and all of a sudden the remaining media company doesn't have to go as hard after a story because they've got no competition. It's a really, 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 really bad, not just sad, but bad day for New Zealand and the democracy we are, Chewy.
Yeah, you don't have to chase the scoop if no one's going to scoop you.
Yeah, exactly. So the scoop can go down to the, oh gosh, imagine the resource we have to put into that scoop. We happen to be in that area next week. Let's just cover it then. We'll just cover it next week because we're going to be in the area. Yeah, it's a travesty. And of course, there's the TVNZ cutbacks as well, which we'll probably get to tonight as well. Let's just have a bit more of a listen from Mike McRoberts.
Create the legacy and carry the legacy. That's what I'm really going to miss.
Even people that have only recently worked at Newshub, I think, feel part of the family. And that's what's going to get us through, isn't it?
The initial proposal put to staff 6 weeks ago was largely unchanged, save 10 roles that will join the 110 that will remain to ensure the television channel and 3Now apps continue. There have been reports recently that a Newshub news program could be made by another company, but played on 3.
Conversations are ongoing. I do not have any conclusion to share, but those conversations are ongoing.
But there is appetite out there for someone to fill this space.
Yes, I believe there is.
There was also a proposal from a group of senior journalists to save the 6 p.m. bulletin for an interim period while transitioning to a digital news offering, but it was rejected.
The problem with it, so last night we talked a bit about why the media is less trusted today than perhaps years gone past. And a lot of it has to do with the kind of the questioning that started with Donald Trump, directly with Donald Trump, that went around America and then around the world with people left in the countries like in New Zealand who would be in that part of the political spectrum. And I read an interesting piece about NPR today. Some people sent it to me on my Twitter feed. And NPR is struggling, and NPR is worried, which is the public broadcaster in America. And they cite 3 particular news stories. They cite Russiagate, where Democratic senators were led on NPR and unchallenged with how much evidence there was for Russiagate. And when the Mueller report came out, there basically wasn't any evidence. That was step 1. Step 2 was Hunter Biden's laptop. Whilst it doesn't have anything necessarily to do with Joe Biden, it was still a story. You know, if it was Eric Trump Jr., they would have been all over it. And the media basically, well, NPR and the news media basically said, we're not going to chase this. And the third story they pointed to was the Wuhan lab leak theory, where epidemiologists very, very early on were saying this could well have come from the leak. And then we all know this turned into if you say that on YouTube, you'll be demonetized and banned. If you say it on Twitter, you'll be kicked off. And those 3 stories are highlighted by this report looking into NPR as hey, you got that wrong. Hey, you got that wrong. Hey, you got that wrong. I don't trust you. Just like that. Bam, 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 gone. And of course, those are 3 American stories, but, you know, there are MAGA people or MAGA aligned people or people who would sit in that political world in New Zealand. And even if we haven't seen those stories impact us, you know, when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. So there's been that influence. And then there's been some very, and when I say good, I mean well orchestrated attacks on things like 3 Waters here in New Zealand that have then added to that. And then, of course, add in the vaccine mandates and the Wellington. All of those things together are this perfect storm. And where the media has a part to play is how they reported some of those things. And as we said last night, how they've lost relationship with their audience. One of the reasons that independent media is going off all over the world, even independent media on the right, is we love you guys and we speak to you guys every night. We have a relationship with you. We literally invite you to our homes and we talk to you on Saturday morning one-on-one and we hear what you've got to say. The mainstream media has become aloof and they've become removed from their audience. I worked with Paul Holmes. I remember stories about Paul Holmes turning up to small town New Zealand on a Friday afternoon to do a Friday night home show, and everyone would come to town and meet him, and he would fucking shake every one of their hands. I was a nobody, well, I still am, but on News Talk ZB, I was bottom of the barrel. And I'd get in the elevator at 6 a.m. to come home, and Holmesy would get in the elevator at 6 a.m. to go down for his last cigarette before the show started. And he'd look at me and he'd go, "So Pat, what are they talking about?" He wasn't being nice. He wanted to know what the public was talking about. He wanted to get a feel of his audience because he had a relationship with them. Who can you name in the media today that is anything like that? Someone in the chat says John Campbell. Maybe the only one, Chili.
Yeah, that's immediately who my mind went to. And, you know, he's not doing news. And, you know, good on him. He's doing his own projects and his own very, very good projects.
Yeah.
But, you know, Campbell Live is not around anymore. I see a comment in the chat there, you know, we're just talking about normal news, right? But this is a devastating blow for news gathering. Like, something happens in this country, who's going to cover it? Where is there going to be a reporter there? Is there going to be enough reporters there? Are we going to be able to get cameras there? You know, all of those sort of things. These are the flow-on effects, and it's just like once it's gone, it's so hard to rebuild.
Yeah,
I think this is one of those things that we're going to be looking back on years down the track if something's not done, and go, "Oh Jesus, that was where it got a lot worse."
Yeah. And the other thing I was going to say about the reason I stopped this video, when they said they put a proposal forward for a digital first, that should have been 10 years ago. Like, this is the thing in New Zealand media.
Yeah.
I've told you guys this before. You know, Chewy and I, right, and me on my own sometimes have had conversations with people quite high up in lots of media places who have said to us, right, that we, meaning what we're doing here, is ahead of the curve. That we are mirroring what's happening in America with digital media, and then we get told by this individual in particular that New Zealand is 5 years behind America, which means what happened in America 5 years ago, which was that everyone's starting to look digitally, hasn't happened in New Zealand yet. So Newshub's responsibility in this is that they did not do this 10 years ago, go digital more heavily, other than going, because television stations, same as radio stations, they don't get it. They think, well, if I film a news show and then I slap that news show on the internet, that's going digital. It's not. If I make a radio show and then I just put that radio show on the internet, that's going digital. It's not. It's a very, very, very different skill set, and it's a very different style. And hello, team, you're a very different audience. So yeah, so Newshub has a responsibility here as to their shutting down, as does other factions as well. It's not all on them, but the mainstream media does have a responsibility through decisions that they haven't made as to where they are today. Fair enough, Chewy? Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not dancing on their grave. I'm just saying, in general, the observation is they do have a part to play in this as well. It's not just all, they couldn't see this coming, because they could have. I mean, pre-pandemic, dozens of news agencies were lost all over the world. This is 4 to 5 years later, or 4 years later, and they really haven't advanced any further. They had a role to play in their downfall. That's all. We keep going?
Yep.
We're deeply disappointed that this has ultimately been unsuccessful, but as you've seen today, the company has told us that it could not see a path to profitability with the model. It was unwilling to sustain any further losses.
Because it wasn't able to address the issue, we didn't get an approval, and therefore we weren't able to proceed.
So the feedback was there is no pathway to profitability, therefore we reject this.
Yeah.
Advertising revenue was down $100 million over the past 2 years and $74 million in 2023 alone. James Gibbons says Warner Brothers Discovery doesn't go to any government to solve business issues, but market reform is desperately needed. The minister has no immediate answers.
I don't think I can actually say anything. I'm trying to be who I am. I'm the minister.
Can I just say, Minister, the giggle and the laugh in the middle of this, if I was a Newshub person just losing my job, I'd be pretty offended as to your tone. And then to say, I'm just trying to be who I am, like you're a person who's going, guys, I just got to be me. It's like a former broadcaster, as we keep getting told, missing the mark that much in commentary to the news agency that has just fallen over. All I want to say is, you have missed the mark, Minister. You have missed the mark with your comments.
She's a broadcasting minister.
Yeah. Well, communication.
Like, it's the biggest thing that's happened in broadcasting, straight out of the gates. And that's what she can muster. That is piss poor.
Desperately needed. The minister has no immediate answers.
I don't think I can actually say anything. I'm trying to be who I am. I'm the Minister for Media and Communications, and what I can do is actually provide a level playing field for the media so that they can be more sustainable, modernise and innovate.
Media commentator and former TV3 News boss Mark Jennings believes a locally owned business could take over and would probably be a better fit than a global company.
To be honest, they don't really care about New Zealand. It's really about the bottom line. And this place has been losing too much money for them. And someone in Park Avenue in New York has gone, we're not having that anymore.
And for the finality today that they're going to go ahead with their plans to shut everything down is it's terrible. It's an awful feeling. And I just feel exhausted, actually, and empty.
But you're still going to store it for yesterday?
Yep, got a story coming up on Newshub Live at 6, so you can tune in for that one.
That one and plenty more until July 5th, when our final news bulletin will air. Before we, like our employer Warner Brothers Discovery, will close the door on this chapter of New Zealand's media history.
It was interesting that she used the phrase "we," because there's that thing that if there's this adage in media that if you're reporting on yourself, something's gone wrong. TV3 is talking about TV3, then there's an issue at TV3. I'm going to let the end of this play. We normally cut it there because I think they talk a little bit about Sunday, and then I'm going to show you Sunday, and then we'll have a chat.
I couldn't smell it.
Our colleague Laura joins us now. Kia ora, Laura. TVNZ also confirmed more job losses today.
That's right, Mike. TVNZ confirmed the cancellation of its current affairs program Sunday, with the last show going to air on the 19th of May. It also confirmed that their re-news team would be reduced from 10 staff to 6 staff. This, of course, comes a day after confirmation its midday bulletin and its tonight bulletin will stop, and its Fair Go program will move off air to a more digital platform. Newshub understands that those teams, Fair Go and Sunday, they'll be looking for 4 roles within those teams, coming from those teams I should say, 2 journalists, an editor and a producer. Now, many employees at TVNZ are part of unions, and one of those main unions is Air2, and a spokesperson, Michael Wood for Air2, has confirmed today that they will be pursuing legal action against TVNZ. They say the company didn't follow its consultation requirements. Under their collective agreement, workers must be involved in developing proposals like this, not just ask for their views at the end of the process.
There you go. So, Chewy, happy for you to. What are your thoughts, my friend? What are you thinking?
Oh, I don't know if I've got too much more to add than what I've already said. Like, just sitting there, just hearing the numbers of how many people are being made redundant. And if you just think in the last month, the massive redundancies that have been announced, obviously in the public service and that sort of thing. There was a story today about Doc cutting 100 workers. There's a lot of people that are out on their ear, and this is something that we were talking about last year as the government. Well, the now government ramped up its rhetoric against people being potentially unemployed, potentially on job seeker, and all of that sort of thing, that they've got to make it tougher and that sort of thing. And I remember thinking then, cool, you're making it tough now at a time of record low unemployment, knowing that your policies are going to see more people potentially having to avail themselves of that service. It's like baiting a trap.
Yeah, it's not just even their policies. We all know, economically speaking, for one of the things that will help inflation is more unemployed people. And so at a time where they're actively going to, as you said, make policies, and we know that the unemployment numbers are going to go up, they're also talking about cracking down on unemployment and unemployed people. Could you imagine any of these journalists? Because this is the other thing, right? Like when Today FM folded, we sat here in these in our mother's basements, Chewy, and we said, Tova will be fine. Yep. The presenters will be fine. Lloyd Burr will be fine. Lloyd Burr is on TV3 within days. Then this year it was announced he was the co-host of the breakfast show, the AM show. Tova is at stuff, doing a whole bunch of stuff. Now, that's because the reason I said those, and it's not to say that the other people at Today FM were any less valued. They weren't. But generally the talent ends up being the ones that are pretty much okay. One of the reasons for that is there's been quite a big media landscape in New Zealand for quite a long time. Now you've got, think about the people on the billboards. Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? There's only TVNZ to go to, or I guess there's radio to go to, or I guess there's, if you're a pure journalist, you can get into writing. You might end up seeing all these people really being PR people in the beehive. That's where often a lot of ex-journalists kind of go to, PR and advisory roles and that sort of thing. But this is, I kind of came into radio after networking started. Networking meaning you can, do a show in Christchurch and it goes out to the regions. But it wasn't really heavily done. So, the breakfast show on News Talk ZB went through the country. The breakfast show on ZM went to through the country. The breakfast show on Then Classic Hits went through the country, other than some regions where they broke out and did it locally. You know, I was in Tauranga and there was a local show, you know, and here in Dunedin, there's still a local show for the hits. Yeah, and they've done very well. Christchurch had a local show, but there was still a network element. And then what happened was COVID hit, and a whole bunch of those smaller localized shows got the chop because there wasn't any. No, sorry, what am I talking about? The global financial crisis, 2008. I was in the wrong worldwide event. It's 2008. And then there was no money, no advertising. Everyone was going broke. So, you know, a whole bunch of those local shows got broken down. So it used to be, for example, ZB, 1ZB, 2ZB, 3ZB, 4ZB, Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin. And then it became mostly out of Auckland, some Wellington, some Christchurch. And then it kind of became all out of Auckland. So, and now we're at this point now where in radio it's networking, but in TV, I guess it's the number of positions available has gone from being sort of a newsroom in every centre, feeding local news and getting fed national news, to a newsroom perhaps in the North Island and maybe in Auckland and Wellington, and maybe one in the South Island doing everything. And so how well people are going to get fed the news from here on in, like, I don't even know if there's going to be, you know, any particular. I can see they're advertising NZME, which is ZB, for a journalist in Dunedin at the moment, but maybe there's one. Maybe there's one radio journalist that feeds Dunedin and all of Otago. You know, maybe there's two or three and does Christchurch, but actually does all of Canterbury. Whereas before there would have been a full newsroom in each of those centres, and we're just getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller because of technology. And now we're getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller because of redundancies, Chewy.
Yep, absolutely. Like I remember doing some work experience stuff in the local Dunedin newsroom. You know, they had a reporter, he had a team, they had a camera crew, that sort of thing. Something happened in Dunedin, they could have someone on the spot within a matter of minutes. If something happened in Otago, you know, they weren't that far away. And it was the same in Canterbury and all of that sort of stuff. But now, like, do you remember that stabbing at Countdown down here a few years back?
Yep.
And there was one network that had the reporter standing in the Countdown car park here in Dunedin, and you could tell because they had the ODT background and the Cadbury's building in the background. It was very obvious that they were in Dunedin. The other network, and I forget which way round it was, the other network had a reporter standing in the Countdown car park in Christchurch. You're doing a live cross from the wrong supermarket. Yeah, like that's just weird.
There is a little bit of background to that. I still agree with what you're saying, but that one particular incident, that reporter who was standing in Christchurch had just been employed to come to Dunedin, but they were in a transitional stage. But that still means at that time they didn't have someone in Dunedin, so they still didn't have a.
I was unaware of that, but I remember seeing it and going.
No, but they didn't.
Really
but your point still stands. What, there was no one in Dunedin to cover that live. You know, I mean, forget even Dunedin. Hang on. Never forget Dunedin. But forget Dunedin, forget Wellington, forget Auckland, forget Christchurch, maybe even Tauranga, Hokitika. There's a storm this weekend. You know, there's massive melees over there. There's very few local ones. Let me tell you this as well. It's funny what you remember when you're talking. I, for a long time here in Dunedin, so I've been in Dunedin for 10 years, and I've done work for the ODT, and I've done work for Media Works down here, on and off, you know. And I remember putting a proposal for there was a radio show, a drive show going on Radio Dunedin that I applied for. And I put a proposal together that says, why don't we utilise the ODT newsroom? Why don't we, because we don't have the resources in this building to do it, why don't we do a deal with the ODT that no money has to change hands because it's we're promoting their product, yada, yada. And why don't we do some business crossing over and like actually come together and get a newsroom, you know, and to make our product better and to give them more exposure for their product as well, and actually, you know, bring it together. This country forevermore has been really, I don't know what the word is, but you know, it's a when you choose to isolationary, whatever it is, with our businesses. So you watch America and you watch a David Letterman show or a Jimmy Kimmel or whatever, and they're on ABC and they have on people from CBS talking about their latest show, from HBO talking about their latest show. They're not like mine. But in New Zealand, you never would see an interview on TVNZ from a TV3 star talking about their TV3 content. I've been saying this to managers for 20 years. It's like one of the things I talked about when we've talked to some people about this show was the only way we could work with any of you guys is if you didn't put any restrictions on us. If we went to company X, I wouldn't sign anything with you if you said we can't talk to company Y. One of the beauties of the independence we have here is we talk to who we want, when we want, how the fuck we want. But I think also the New Zealand media, mainstream media, has missed a trick in being so isolationist. That'll do. Isolationist. By not drawing on content from other providers. Content is content. If I speak to someone from an opposing brand and that gets eyeballs and earballs on me and my product and my advertisers, why would I care? But we don't. We've got this isolationist theory in New Zealand when it comes to media, and I think it's detrimental. And that could be one of dozens of reasons the New Zealand media landscape hasn't been as successful as it could have been.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, certainly when I was in radio, wanting to be in that career, and that was when the things were condensing down into that network fashion, and the writing on the wall there was like, well, are they going to give? There's just less shows to go around, right? You can't earn your stripes doing a late night show when there's one late night show and it's coming out of Auckland because it's cheaper, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I remember at that point of like, well, it's time to do DIY. We, like me and some other graduates, set up our own radio station, which we ran for 5 years here in Dunedin. And that was, again, I think the curse of being too early. If that had been 7 years later, it'd be a podcast or something like that. But we were doing low power FM station, and we were coming up then with ideas of maybe there's some way we can stream this on the internet to another place that would rebroadcast it, and we'd spin up our own little pirate radio network. We were trying to mimic the big boys there.
Yeah.
And I think we're kind of in a similar place here, where we want to talk about news and we want to give a point of view that perhaps isn't reflected or is just an alternative point of view that we're not seeing in that stripe. And now we have less resources to draw on because that other half of our media landscape is fucking gone.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And when people would talk about the Radio New Zealand TVNZ merger, like it was a bad thing. This is one of the things, is that was supposed to solidify those two institutions, to cut costs, to cement that into the media landscape of New Zealand, and people got cold feet. It was put in the too hard basket, or all of the opinions on that move, and now we don't have it, and it's not going to happen.
But remember, Chewy, landlords get $3 billion.
It's true, and I am super happy for those guys.
And this is another situation where successive governments have contributed to this as well. We've been saying, well, I guess we've been doing this for 2.5 years, on and off sort of thing. This show, we've been saying it since the conversations happened about the merger, that TV1 should be ad free. That would send all that revenue to TV3. TV2 can still have a crack. Prime TV, those places would then be the places for advertising dollars to go. And that could have been another, that game where you put all those sticks in and you pull one out at a time. That was another one of the sticks. I also want to put up what Miriama Kamo put out today, which is the statement from Sunday. It's just on Twitter. Miri says, no words, but here's a few. The Sunday team was informed today that a proposal to cancel the show will go ahead. We were told, I just think this is such a fucking nasty way to do it as well, because TVNZ had all these announcements yesterday, and then they went, we'll talk to Sunday tomorrow. Surely you've kind of gone, oh, well, we're probably not in the cancellation. Probably the head's not on the chopping board, or else they would have just told us today. But no, 24 hours later, they told them this. Told the company can no longer afford to produce it, and our last program will end mid-May. We're all gutted. not just for the loss of our jobs, but for the loss of a special part of the news landscape in Aotearoa. They gave New Zealanders a voice for more than 20 years. Here's the thing, right, Chewy? You'll be able to speak to this. I'll ask you. We know we don't do this because if I'm seeking an answer, when I was studying to teach, they said never ask a question if you're looking for a particular answer. It's called fishing. But I'm going to ask you a question, Jerry, that I have an answer for, but I think you will as well because you know more about the stuff.
Yeah.
If we decided to start up a full-on Air Force today with a whole bunch of jets, could we do it? And if we couldn't, why not?
Oh, okay. If we do, yeah, okay. So
if the government purchased a whole bunch of new jets, what would be the reason we wouldn't be able to start that up tomorrow?
Well, there's the upfront cost. And then there's the fact that you have to train the people to fly them.
Bingo.
So there's a lead term on that, and maintenance.
Because when they mothballed the Skyhawks?
Yeah.
Whole bunch of that talent went offshore. Whole bunch of those pilots left and were gone. Once you mothball Sunday, whole bunch of the talent is gone. The resources are gone, the equipment's gone, the capital's gone. And it's really hard to start up again. And this is the problem with these sorts of things. TVNZ have told us that they want to reimagine current affairs with a smaller digital offering. But Sunday as we know it will end. As Miriama Kamo says each week, thanks for watching. Ngā mihi nui, hei kona. So, and that's the problem. Same for TV3, because all of the sets, all of the desks, all of the equipment, most of the cameras, gone. And you know what? When I was working for ODT, we actually bought one of TV3's desks. They will go. They will be sold off to smaller agencies. That was one. So we bought one down from Auckland to ODT. Those will go. They won't have the physical assets anymore. And then what you're going to need if you want to start anything else up again is probably a $10, maybe $20 million injection. And who's going to do that for news in this day and age?
No, we're poorer because of this, and there's people crying about it now, but they're unhinged and very short-sighted. I think
I am concerned for two things. The first is, why am I seeing hashtag Daddy Chewy in the chat? And the second thing is, why did you star that, Chewy, to watch and make me put up?
I didn't necessarily star it for anything.
Well, I didn't.
It's just an interesting comment that I think needs reflecting on. Thank you.
Some of the super chats
should have been a super chat.
Yeah, there you go. Alex says on Facebook for One News and Newshub, the Cookers were on their Facebook page promoting reality check news and even celebrating the closure of Newshub and the loss of shows like Fair Go, etc. This is why Cookers don't know what they're talking about. And it's not going to happen to TVNZ, but I'll be blunt with you. If you've only got one news agency left, there is statistically a far more likely scenario for that to become corrupt. It's not going to happen, but actually getting rid of the other one is actually the opposite of what Cookers should be doing. If they are ones who are saying, oh, don't be biased and be honest, if you don't have any competition, then an entity can just do whatever they want. TVNZ is not going to do that, but they could. Jackson Media that was $10, I think, by the way, for Alex. Thank you, sir. Jackson Media for $3.50. How do you make a profitable, non-biased news platform? Well, I don't know if you can. Just being blunt, but that's why news is not really an investment; it's a service. Like straight news is a service, and by straight I don't mean heterosexual, obviously. But just doing news, no opinion, no anything, is quite difficult. Although in saying that, you might find that TVNZ News, the 6 o'clock bulletin right now, could become quite profitable because there's nothing else. So how do you make a non-biased news platform profitable? Well, maybe have no competition. I guess we shall see about that. Do you want to answer that question at all, Chewy, or shall I go on to I've got two other super chats. I think Chewy might be frozen. Are you talking to us, Chewy? No? Yes? You're still there? Okay, you go sort yourself out. Frosty in the super chat goes for a $10 super chat. Thank you, sir. It doesn't matter if you like Newshub or reality check radio. What matters is the ripple effects that'll happen to New Zealand's fourth estate and, moreover, democracy. I don't think it's democracy part one, like it's a trilogy, part one. And another $10 super chat. It's very generous of you, Frosty. The domino effect of the collapse of New Zealand's media outlets, whether it be mainstream or not, will affect Kiwis in the next decade in ways we don't and can't expect. I think that's very, very true. I think it's very true indeed. And yeah, I mean, like if you think what's happened this week, I mean, think about the last 6 months, and I'm sure there's going to be more, and I'm not going to get them all, but Today FM, TVNZ with Fair Go Sunday, the midday news bulletin, the late night news bulletin, all of Newshub, 6 p.m. bulletin, everything going. And you know what? Throw in their reality check radio. If you don't want to give them much credit, you can still say that they are a media company that was selling news. I say news with apostrophes because, you know, it is what it is. So yeah, did I read somewhere today 11 to 1,200 news jobs have gone? Like, you know, journalists and producers since the national government came about. I'll check that in for tomorrow. Kiwi Rascal always asks, hey DOC Studios, if you guys had a bit more income, would you consider getting field reporters to fill some of the void being left by Newshub? I mean, that's probably on a level right now that we couldn't even consider. But we're always talking about where to from here, what's happening next. And to be honest with you, probably what we do in this kind of situation is like I know a reporter in Christchurch who does Christchurch news personally. I know someone in Queenstown who does Queenstown news. So rather than perhaps getting people specifically to do it, I probably just build relationships with people who are in this world and who could do things for us. But look, I mean, I don't know if I should say this or not, but the reality is, if we wanted to do this full time, I mean, you could, if you watched last night, you could have worked it out for yourself. Because I said if we had that $5 million, we could run for 10 years. To get this thing going full time with 4 full-time staff, I reckon the number is $400 to $500K a year. Whether we can generate that through advertisers, patrons, YouTube money, sponsorship, you know, merch, or whether we find an investor, I don't know. But I reckon just putting it out there, at the moment, it's about $500,000 a year to do that kind of thing. And you just think, if there's 4 full-time staff, that still feels like a pretty lean amount of money. If you think about the average New Zealand salary at the moment is $90,000. So it's actually pretty lean doing that. And finally, this is some OnlyFans shit, I think, here, Chewy. Yo, can we get a shot of Chewy's wriggling his beautiful hairy toes when he gets back? From Joseph Fletcher for $5. So, do you have an OnlyFans that deals in feet?
For $5?
Yeah, not for $5.
I am not your cheap hussy, sir. I have standards. You'll need to pump those rookie numbers up. I'll tell you when it's enough.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that we were going to quite talk in as much depth about that as we have, but I guess that's part of the beauty of this show. We we talk until it's finished, and I feel like that's finished, and I feel like it's time to move on to the conversation we started last night, and haven't. That's my favourite $5 hussy. About Prime Minister Luxon and Estonia. So the Prime Minister was on The Country today. The Country is actually a program run out of Dunedin, but it's on the News Talk ZB network. In the regions. It doesn't go to the big cities, it just goes to the regions. And as it sounds, it's a show about farming and agriculture and climate and that kind of stuff. And so Jamie Mackay is the host, and he was talking to the Prime Minister this morning, and they talked a bit about Estonia. And Jamie Mackay was like, why are you mentioning Estonia? What would you actually, what about that? We'll just play it, shall we?
targets that I want the government to be really focused on over the next 6 years. The public service, I want to be able to report on them quarterly to the public of New Zealand so they can hold me to account. And all I was saying is the benefit of these targets is it makes people work out what's working and what's not working, and that in New Zealand that we should be doing more of or less of. And then likewise, when you look at Ireland and what they've done on research and development, you look at what Estonia's done around its IT and digital world, when you look at what's happening in New South Wales, Singapore, other small advanced countries that are similar size to New Zealand. Let's learn from other countries that have also wrestling with some of these same problems. So, but you know, a bit out of context, to be honest, as a headline, but that was the point I was making when I introduced the targets on Monday.
Well, Estonia has digitised 99% of its public services. You're trying to get rid of 99% of ours. Tongue-in-cheek, of course, Prime Minister.
But I think that, the mindset I was just going to say in Estonia is an incredible story, actually, that the public can deal with their government and they're treated like customers. And they do that through offering really good digital services. You think about the challenges that we have, where actually our government service agencies dealing with your farmers through the MFE or MPI or through government in general. You know, we make it hard and we make it paper, you know, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape, and we make it a lot of friction in that relationship. And so, yeah, why don't you think about the public as customers, as you would in a business, but as other countries have, like Singapore and Estonia, for example, and even New South Wales, and actually start to digitise the services so it's easier for people to engage with the government.
I think I'll stick with Ireland. Estonia's too close to Putin for me. Look, latest poll, very early in the electoral...
That'll do. He goes on about polling, which doesn't matter. Now, the one thing I wanted to put out of there, Chewy, as well, is... Did you see that video clip of Trump today? Trump talking to rich fundraisers, promising them he'd lower their taxes. So, like, sometimes they reveal the truth without thinking. You know, Luxon has been talking so much about his business experience, and we've constantly been saying you can't run a country like you run a business. Twice in that 90-second piece, he was talking about citizens as customers. He actually has said it out loud. We should treat people like they're customers. Now, to be customers, you have to be of a business. If you're a business, you're running the country very, very differently. So I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but when the Prime Minister starts to say we should be treating people like customers, I kind of go, well, I don't. If you're going to run the country like a charitable cause, a service-based industry, you know, that really the bottom line doesn't matter as much about the good service, then that's not a customer. That's something very different. But he said it out loud, and I just thought, well, there's probably more to that, more to meets the eye than just that little word passing over so quickly, Chewy.
He's got it backwards. Look, I said this yesterday that he's actually really good at identifying problems and then going absolutely bananas with the solution. If he wants to treat the country like a company, the citizens are not the customers; they're the shareholders. The customers are business, not the other way around. And then I think that's quite telling. You know, we're the people that invest in this country. The business extracts profit from it.
Yeah.
You know, he's quite willing to pull Estonia out. Now, not to knock Estonia. I think seeing Estonia mentioned was quite a shocking. Why are we comparing ourselves to an ex-Soviet state? The thing when you look at those Baltic states is once they got out under the foot of Russia, they had to reinvent themselves very, very quickly to join the EU. So the charts of how much they've improved their GDP is out the gate. And I'm sure he's seen that on a graph and he goes, that's what we want to do. And stuff like the fact that they've digitized their public service, huge cost savings there. Their tax, which I was looking at earlier today, is really interesting. They have just a flat 20% tax on fucking everything.
Yeah.
Like, and just the way that they enforce it as it's, I forget the terminology on it, whether it's flat or whether it's progressive, but the way they implement it is it's a progressive tax policy. They tax land, not what's on the land. You know, they do lots of things that we don't do that could be worth looking at it. I'm not here to knock it, but he'll cherry pick things and not look at the reasons why it is that way. one of the things that I think is like if you want to, like he was talking like we need to double exports and that sort of thing, and I just went, how are we going to double exports when all of our investment is tied up in houses? Nobody's investing in these companies that are going to do the exporting that he wants. He's almost there. He's almost he's worked out there's a problem. He's worked out where he wants to go, and he's completely fucked how to get from A to B.
Yeah.
You need to get investment out of housing.
What you've just said about cherry picking, I think, is exactly it. You know, he sees a graph and he goes, oh, I'd like to have a graph like that. Oh, that's a good looking graph. And I've talked about this for a long, long time because people would often say things on Talkback like, oh, you know, you should see Singapore. The streets are clean and there's no crime. We should have that here. And the thing is, the only reason Singapore can have that is all of how they run the whole society. You can't just go, I want clean streets like Singapore here, because the reason Singapore's got clean streets, certainly at the time, one of the reasons was the serious way they would punish you physically with bats and stuff if you littered. Now, I don't know if it's still like that now. So you can't have the result of a policy without having the policy. So you can't have the result of Estonia or Ireland or somewhere else without having all the workings of those places as well. You can't have the crime rate of Singapore or the clean streets of Singapore without all of the policy that leads to the crime rates being low and all of the punitive punishment that leads to them being low. You can't just go, look how they're doing it. This is what you're saying with the word cherry picking, Chewy, without implementing all the stuff in that country that leads up to that. So without basically getting all of Singapore or all of Estonia's society and going on top of New Zealand, you can't just have their outcomes, to use the word he loves. It's all or nothing. It's all or nothing. I want to play some more stuff though, because this is from AM show. I think this might have been this morning, might have been yesterday morning. But they talk a bit about this, and you know, to his credit, Lloyd Burr does a little bit of pushback, and there is one very, very, very good question that's going to come towards the end, Chewy, which will be in one other clip after this, which has a little bit to do with entitlements. Wait and see.
Can I ask you about Estonia? You mentioned Estonia yesterday as a country that we want to be like. Why Estonia? Why do you like that country?
Well, all I'm saying is that, you know, I really have a vision. By 2040, I want New Zealand to be one of the leading advanced small countries on earth. And for that to happen, I want us to be more prosperous economically. I want us to be doing better socially, and I want us to be delivering on our...
For that to happen, you need to start building it in New Zealand, our New Zealand model from the ground up. Not going, we want to be like Estonia or we want to be like Singapore. Because as we've just said, unless you bring every single policy of Estonia into New Zealand, you won't get their outcomes. So the way you do that, Mr. Luxon, is you start being the fence at the top of the cliff rather than the ambulance at the bottom. You start being the carrot and less of the stick. You start at the bottom and you start building a New Zealand model for that to get to that, rather than looking at other countries who have societies unlike New Zealand, therefore we can't get the same results that those societies get. That's the way you
environmental goals and targets. When I look around the world at other 5 million people population or small countries, advanced countries, you look at the work of Estonia, and they've done some fantastic work on bringing digital services to their public services, a customer service mindset about how their government interfaces with their citizens. I look at Ireland and I look at what they do on research, development and innovation in science and technology. That's really interesting, as is their work on education. I look at what Singapore have done with respect to getting delivery out of their public service, not dissimilar size to New Zealand. They have targets like I've just announced, so does New South Wales as a state government as well. So, you know, I just look at other places to say part of the thing is that, you know, many countries around the world are wrestling with the same problems that we have here in New Zealand. If we're very successful, I think, at a lot of things, but where there's things that other countries have done well in, we should just steal it and make sure we bring that into New Zealand's thinking as well.
Yeah, I guess the difference is that we're not a former Soviet republic, are we? And we're not an emerging market. We're a fully developed market.
But we have lots of other advantages, don't we?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we have lots of other advantages, but I'm just saying to you, across the world, there are other small advanced
Didn't
economies.
like that one very much, did he?
They've done things that work.
No.
Likewise, we've got great things happening within New Zealand that we actually want to see across the rest of the country, and we've got to make sure that it gets everywhere. So, that's part of the challenge. We've set some ambitious goals. We want New Zealanders to focus on. We are here to improve the country by these targets, and as a result, we look at whatever's working around the world in New Zealand. We innovate. We try different things. We make sure that everything we're spending money on is delivering improved results and gets us closer to delivering those goals.
There you go. So there's the conversation from the AM show as well. And I thought it would probably be appropriate, and you've started talking about this to do with the taxes, to bring up Clint Smith's tweet that I mentioned yesterday, but if you weren't here, we'll see it again. So if we want to be like Estonia, okay. If we want New Zealand to be like Estonia, it has free tertiary, free GP visits, free public transport, etc., paid for by a 39% tax wedge, New Zealand is 20%, including a 33% social security payroll tax. It also has 82% home ownership, a legacy of distribution of homes post-USSR. As I'm saying, you can't get the outcomes of these other countries without transposing the whole society onto New Zealand, and he's not doing that. And I think you were very astute earlier, Chewy, when you said he's seen a graph. And that's about as deep as it's gone. He's seen a graph of growth and goes, that's what we want. Yeah, there's a lot of people have to show their workings, Mr. Luxon, to see how to get that graph. And unless they show the workings like they have in that country for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years to get them to that graph, unless you can do that in your term, the whole previous 50 years of Estonia, probably not going to get the same outcomes.
And I know I'm beating a horse here, but it's not dead, but it's very close to. The problem that we have is investment.
Yeah.
We've created our own money trap in housing, and it has completely skewed our society almost. We've taken away people's security in later life because they can't afford to buy houses. We've taken away the ability for people to start families in a timely fashion. They're putting that off later and later and later. We're affecting the jobs that people take because the first sort of thing that they're considering is, can I live in that area? I might be able to get a better job in Auckland, but I can't fucking afford to live there. Those sort of things. And it's all driven from housing, and it's all driven from a place where it's been such an effective tax dodge for so many people for decades, and nobody wants to touch it because our ministers and our lawmakers, they're up to their eyeballs in property portfolios. And we're not going to touch that. It's too scary to touch that. But while the money is so good in there, then why would you put it into a new business that is innovating, that is coming up with the next big thing? Why would you take that risk when you can buy an 80-year-old villa and double your money in a couple of years? It's just ridiculous, and they won't touch it. They won't touch it at all.
Yeah. All right. There's one more clip that I want to play from this interview, and this will leave you cold. And just remember, people out there who dislike Jacinda Ardern vehemently. There's some of you out there, there's some of you watching right now. I want you to think about the question that this wealthy Prime Minister is about to be asked by Lloyd. And if Lloyd doesn't say Jacinda Ardern did it, I would accept Christopher Luxon's answer. Because Christopher Luxon's going to refuse to answer something in a second that Jacinda Ardern chose to do. We're being a little bit cryptic here, but let me play it for you and see what you think. And just remember that idea about taking $1,000 a week for the house he was living in and what I'm entitled to. Just remember that.
Very quickly, and I don't want a long-winded answer from this, do you deserve a pay rise?
Again, those are decisions for an independent remuneration authority. And
that's
again,
not the
it's important
question.
Prime Ministers and MPs aren't involved in setting their pay.
Would you freeze it like Ardern did?
Again, we've got an independent remuneration authority. They need to go through a process. It's designed in a way so that you don't have a Prime Minister or an MP commenting on their own pay or setting their own pay. Let's see what the remuneration authority does. They're working through that now. Let's let them do their work.
Okay, it sounds like a no to me. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
There you go. That's a little bit at the end of that, and people out there who are critical of Jacinda Ardern's government, fair, but this Prime Minister makes it abundantly clear with his non-answer that he is not going to stop him or his ministers getting their pay rise in a same period where he's talking about the cost of living crisis, the same time period where minimum wage is going up such less than inflation. He's not prepared to actually say, you know what, we should stand by what we've said of others. At the same time, he's firing people out of the public sector. I wonder if you took all of the percentages, the small percentage incrementally increases that the politicians are getting, I wonder how many salaries that would add up to for someone working in one of the government agencies that he's cancelling. I wonder how much money that would add up to that they could add or take off their $3 billion tax cuts that they're currently getting from taking literally the food out of children's mouths, Chewy.
He could have answered that question really easily and not like the bulk of what he said is correct. Like I 100% understand why the Remuneration Authority is completely independent. It's a good idea. Like it's a great idea. But that wasn't the question that he was asked.
This is what I said, especially when Lloyd says, like Jacinda Ardern did. So that means there's a precedent, and yes, you're not supposed to get involved with it, but it obviously means you can therefore still instruct them no pay rises. So that's the line that matters. So that has been done within the last term, and he doesn't. He refuses to rule it out. He refuses to rule out pay rises.
Remember that I've talked about that Luxon does not recognise political capital when it's put in front of him.
Yeah,
he recognises capital. There's no argument about that. But political capital, he doesn't recognise. It's just like a missing asset thing in a video game. There was an opportunity for him to go, yeah, everyday New Zealanders are doing it tough. And, I'm not going to prejudge what the Remuneration Authority says. They're a completely independent body, and the Prime Minister cannot be seen to be influencing that. But I have my personal views when people are doing it so tough. That's saying more without saying much more, if you get what I mean there. I once saw, I forget where I was reading it, but at one point, the average backbencher's wage was close to what a teacher would get.
Right.
Now it's near 4 times what a teacher would get.
Mm.
And I also find it telling that when we look back at what the Green Party was suggesting as far as a wealth tax, that basically started to kick in at a backbencher's salary.
Right.
So, I don't want to get into a conversation where like these fucking pricks with their fat paychecks and stuff like that. Like Parliament, being a politician is a hard job. It has very, very long hours, lots of travel, lots of responsibility and that sort of thing. And although and you're open for criticism all the time. If they weren't, we wouldn't be able to do this. But, it is a tough job. I think it needs commiserate compensation. But it's also one of those things where it's all political. You have to sort of go, well, look, no one's getting a pay rise this time because nobody can afford their fucking groceries, and it's a bad look. It's a political decision. It's image.
It's also, though, the word deserve, Lloyd used a clever word. Do you deserve a pay rise? Not should you get one. That word carries some weight, meaning are you deserving of? Not just the remuneration will decide. Like if you're a teacher, you go up a scale, 12 months, you go up a scale. It's got nothing to do with deserve. It's like if you're there for a time period, you go up a scale. But I just think it's an interesting perception.
I think that was almost a trap.
Yeah, because Luxon has already been proven, and he's used the word about what he's entitled to.
I'm entitled to my entitlements.
We will move on, though, because we've got to get one other story done before we finish. Before we do, Sarah says, Pat, would it make sense for TV1 News and TV3 to merge? I mean, if we'd been talking 12 months ago, you would have seen TVNZ probably take a whole bunch of the Newshub reporters, but TVNZ is currently cutting back. So because they're cutting back, I don't know if there's going to be a place for it. Peter, thank you for the $2 super chat. I want to be a citizen, not a customer. Absolutely. Peter also says public service by ChatGPT. Thank you for your $2
Actually, slight tangent here. I saw a story the other day that the New York Council, or whatever they call it, mayor's office, whatever, had rolled out a chat AI program to answer citizens' questions about laws and rules and just various government stuff to do with New York. And people immediately put that to the test by giving it like, my employer is not paying me for X amount of things. Or I think one of the questions was, an employee for another business than the one that I run, can I fire them? And the AI was like, yes, under New York state law, you can.
Sure. I also noticed a story last week that I don't know, I haven't used it yet, but the AI chat on Twitter, whatever that's called, is woke. So apparently asking various questions, it gives you very, very lefty answers, which I'm sure drove Elon Musk furious. Because IKEA says, thank you for the $2. Average salary in Estonia is 41k, and Winnie Bear for $3.50. Thank you for the super chat. You can get up there, Winnie Bear. Go on, there you go. Did you see Sean interviewing Simon Scott? I did not. I shall possibly have a look. Right, stick with us because we've got the story on school lunches now. But actually, after that story, there's a tie-in that I want to play for you, and you don't want to miss it. It's from a story from last week. It's involving mental health advocate Jazz Thornton, and it's an incredible story. Chewy, your mouth will be agasped in a good way. First of all, let's have a look. There is some young activists from a school, I think in Porirua, who are off to Parliament to talk about school lunches.
This Porirua school has been using social media to defend their school lunch program. Today they brought their message to Parliament.
This government does not care about our children. David Seymour, I know that you're in government, but it doesn't mean you have to take free lunches away from these innocent kids.
We feed 420 kids every day in-house, a nutritious meal. It motivates our kids to come to school. It energises them for the afternoon.
I mean, is there much wastage at your school?
Bishop Viard, because we do it in-house, I believe there's very, very minimal to zero wastage.
The school lunch program costs more than $300 million a year, and it will be slashed.
We've got to make cabinet decisions about how we're going to implement it and make it more affordable.
You're looking at cuts of maybe 30 to 50%, is that right?
Yeah, and it's possible that
Okay, so 30 to 50%, that means they're looking to save between 100 and 150 million, because they said it's 300 million. 30% would be 100 million, 50% would be 150. So that gives them about 1/8. 150 million is about 1/8 of 1/3 of the tax refunds and tax going back to landlords. We'll just get to the end of this.
And then by doing that, the program becomes more expensive per meal delivered, becomes less effective. They'll put up barriers to people getting it, and then they'll go, see, the whole program's not worth it.
Yep. We've said it before, the right keep telling you that government's broken, that when they get in, they enact policies that break government, then they step back, like Chewy said, and say, see, we always told you it was broken.
Going to save that much money. Our challenge will be to deliver the results that everybody wants while spending less money.
He's never wanted the school lunch program anyway, and in coalition he knows that it is important to some of the partners. So let's just hope that cut's not as big as what it could be.
This Christchurch social worker is hearing from many parents in need and thinks the program should be extended.
I'm seeing a massive increase on people needing help for food, their children not being able to attend school, and a lot of shame and embarrassment for these parents not being able to have enough food to send their kids to school.
Back at Parliament, kids know what's on the line.
If we had no more school lunches, some kids won't have food.
what's your favourite school lunch?
Butter chicken. For me, it's the nachos.
Nachos?
Butter chicken, yeah. Butter chicken. Butter chicken, definitely.
A nervous wait to see how much food the government takes off the table. Benedict Collins.
So, I mean, one of the cool things about that, Chewy, is, you know, in my day, you ask a kid what's their favourite school lunch, it would have been pies, or it would have been donuts and pies and buttered chicken breast or parts of chickens, protein and rice and butter. That's kind of cool. Now, I do have somewhere to go with this, but this is now, the floor is open. Would you like to share anything?
Yeah, look, I just want to hammer home the point that one of the benefits of a mass feeding program like this is that you open it to everyone. It doesn't matter whether they're wealthy kids or poor kids, that sort of thing. You don't want to put a barrier in a school that points at a student and goes, that student is poor. And you can dress that up and say, hey, look, we're targeting this to the kids most in need. It sounds good in a soundbite, but the effectiveness of that program is taken away when you effectively ostracize these kids and mark them.
Yeah, and it'll be the kids who are kind of on the slight side of, like, if there's a middle ground, right, and you're feeding everyone, then all of the kids that are really struggling and need it the most get it, and others do as well. If you start bringing cuts and lines in, what they'll do is there'll be ones that sit sort of in that middle third that really do kind of need it, but they aren't kind of the bottom third, and they'll get caught up in missing out, and then those ones will be the ones who are impacted. And it's often, I don't know if it's a philosophy of the left, it's certainly my philosophy, and I've probably said it before on the show, that I would always err towards giving stuff to someone who might not need it rather than taking it away from someone who might need it. Like, I'd rather include 10% of people who don't need it than to take it away from 10% of people who might need it, even though the bottom 30% are still getting it. And this government seems to be about, we want to find where that line is for the absolute need. And that means if you're in that kind of the bottom third, yes, but then if you're in that middle third, that, you know, half of them, so we're going to cut them out because they're not the ones most in need. Remember, when he says most in need, that might mean that I'm being silly for effect, but the 100 children in New Zealand who need it most, if they gave it to those people, they could claim we're giving it to the most in need. But hang on, there's like 20,000 who need it. But the most in need are getting it. So it's all weasel words, and it's slimy. It's really slimy. And it does come back to do with, I don't give a fuck how many times we say this, is if they weren't giving money back to landlords, there'd be $3 billion more to be able to deal with. And on that note, I'm going to play you this clip. This clip is Jazz Thornton. Jazz Thornton is a fairly spectacular human being. She's a mental health advocate. I don't want to get too much into her story because I'll mangle it, but basically she was a teenager who was in desperate need of help because of her mental health. You know, attempted to take her own life, I think, on several times. And the turning point for her, and I'm pretty sure this is what it is, but she tried to take her own life in a tree, and a female officer was holding her legs to take the weight off her neck so she wouldn't die. That's the point that Jazz got to. And from there, you know, she's been able, and she's been young New Zealander there, and most of all, I think she won Dancing with the Stars. But she has a spectacular, she's got what I guess we'd call the mana to speak on mental health, like not many people have in New Zealand. From A, being there, to B, going through it, to C, and I'm always careful about saying coming out the other end, because, you know, I talk about addiction, that the addiction's always in the car park doing press ups, but, you know, to a point right now where they're looking back and they're helping others. Now, she is talking last week about this idea of shutting down the Suicide Help Prevention Office. And it does tie into what we're talking about, because she makes a pretty compelling statement last week about tax breaks and taking money away from these kinds of offices. And the reason it ties in is the exact point. The money that this government is choosing to spend and the money that they're taking away, whether it's school lunches or whether it's the Suicide Prevention Office, which I think they've actually said it's going to stay, but at this point it was still up in the air. And I just want to play you some of this, okay? You'll get a vibe.
The Suicide Prevention Office is so important. It tells every single person that is struggling with suicide that they matter. And I've had a lot to do with them in regards to identifying people that are at risk, contagion. There's a whole bunch of stuff that other sectors just aren't aware of or aren't on top of. And we have literally worked so closely with them in trying to help make sure that we are preventing and then not just in the aftermath of it.
Because it came about after a review in 2019, and obviously they saw lots of gaps, particularly within the public service, and this has been driving a whole lot of different change, so everyone's on board. So can you explain maybe what they do? Do you know what the Suicide Prevention Office does?
Well, they're kind of, I guess, overarching everything in regards to being able to see and identify where there might be clusters. They're able to see trends. They're able to understand people that are at risk. Recently, we were seeing a social media kind of cluster that was happening and having to identify, okay, who's at risk? How do we contact them? Contacting in with the local officers and the suicide prevention coordinators on the ground who understand what's happening, so that there's a big kind of overarching thing and it's not just everyone's detached, because that's where the issues and where people fall through the cracks.
The Minister didn't know about this at all. Are you surprised?
Yes, I'm very surprised. I think wholeheartedly, and I'll say this very blatantly, that Christopher Luxon, if you and your office decide to shut down the Suicide Prevention Office, you are saying that every single person that is suicidal is worth less than your tax cuts. That's what it is. You're saying that they don't matter. You're saying that their lives don't matter. This is an office that is so important, that is dedicated to saving people's lives in an epidemic that we know is one of our biggest killers in this country.
They campaigned quite a lot on this. They campaigned on, we're going to create New Zealand's first ever Minister for Mental Health, and this is the first thing that they do.
I mean, I feel like it's for show. I think a lot of people like to think of mental health as depression, anxiety, the kind of maybe at the earlier stages. We don't like to think of it as the fact that people are actively taking their lives, and we need to be 100% focusing on those early prevention skills. But right now, people are taking their lives, and we need to have those kinds of officers that are aware of that and that are able to take those steps to stop it.
So are you saying people's lives will pay for tax cuts? That's essentially how you're saying the government's...
If this office gets cut, yes.
What?
Jesus. Yep. We have dreadful statistics in here for mental health and youth suicide, especially in this country, and anything that pulls away from that. To, like, again, everything, you can just draw a straight line between the cuts that they're making to these social services and tax cuts for fucking landlords. It's so cartoonish at this stage. Taking away lunches for kids, taking away something that can identify clusters of suicides. And like, as someone that grew up in a reasonably smallish town, I can tell you the ripples of a suicide.
Yeah.
In a community like that, in a place like a school, it's devastating. I must admit, I didn't know what that office did, but her description of looking for these patterns is just so important. But yes, that's the thing. They are putting, like Brooke Van Velden said, that we put too high a price on human life during the COVID thing. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It's someone's P&L, their profit and loss statement, versus the worth of a human life.
I've watched this clip 3 or 4 times to get ready for tonight, and right now I feel angrier than I felt any other time I watched it. I guess when I'm prepping, I'm kind of getting stuff ready for tonight. I'm going to show you this and we'll show this. And now that I actually sat, listened to it again, I'm even though this has sort of been, it appears has been turned over. We could go on some pithy kind of attack on the government going, hang on, but you said you wouldn't interfere with the CEOs and now you're interfering. So is it hands on, hands off? The truth is, I feel like saying this is why I sit on the left in politics. Because this is the kind of evil, vindictive, money-grubbing, focus on the bottom line, come hell or high water, costing people's lives, that the right do. Whether it's making kids unhealthier by taking away school lunches, whether it's potentially it was at that point shutting down an office that's going to lead to more people killing themselves. I am, we've said this before. Mr. Luxon, if you open the door to some of these people and to some of these policies, whatever breaks, you own. If something happens within this system because of your cutbacks that causes more teenagers to kill themselves, you fucking own that. Because the left wouldn't have done this. Now, there's other things we can criticize the left on. Sure. Chewy and I have been critical of, in particular, Labour for a long time. But what you won't find on the left is, hey, if we get rid of this office that can help curve the upswing of teenage suicides, if we get rid of that, we'll save 0.00001% on our bottom line. You won't fucking get that on the left. So yeah, the left is flawed. Yeah, some of my colleagues on the left are fucking nuts, but they're not evil, vindictive, looking to slam and put their knee on the neck of the vulnerable for the sake of a fucking dollar or two. And that's why I sit on the left. And that's why I will fight hammer and tooth with people on the right who basically are supporting money over minors, cash over kids. It's just fucking evil. It's fucking evil.
But remember, we want to be a shit hot small nation. We just don't want to invest in the people that are in it.
Yeah.
Like I would like if someone said, hey, look, there's no tax relief for you this year, but here's all the things that your tax are buying. Me as a childless person, if someone said, hey, look, there's no tax relief for you this year, but we're feeding a whole bunch of kids.
Yeah.
I'd be like, sweet, I'm cool with that.
How about we're upgrading all the ICUs in the country? How about we're doing, it's like what could we do with that $3 billion?
Yeah. It's just ridiculous. And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right to identify. This is why I sit on the left.
Yeah.
Like I'm someone that's been involved in business and capitalism and all of that sort of stuff. And it's just like business. One of the things that business can do, they don't like admitting this, right? But they adapt. They adapt to the conditions. They adapt to the rule set that they're given. They'll bitch and moan, but they'll still do it because it's still profitable.
Yeah.
But what like I saw an incredibly insensitive comment in the chat there just before, so do you agree that it's the parents' responsibility to feed the kids? Fucking of course. But the follow-up question to that is, what if they can't?
Well, it's not even, but what if they
so
can't?
You let the kids starve?
Yeah, but what that person will be saying is it's their fault. Well, what are they doing?
Yeah.
Spending their money on like tobacco and alcohol. What about spending it on rent that if you're living in Auckland might be $1,000 a week and you might only have just enough to cover the rent and power and not much left for food? What about for that reason?
The kids have got to suffer the sins of their parents.
Or the sins of the landlord.
We start the cycle of poverty and deprivation again. And we know that these kids that aren't engaged in schools, that are hungry all the time, that are from a dysfunctional family, they're just in that then. They're just in that. We're not going to help them out at all. We're not going to try and put them on a better trajectory than their parents are. We're not going to give them the skills that their parents perhaps lack. We're not going to give them better opportunities than what their parents had. We just leave them there. This is why I sit on the left.
Yeah.
This is why I'm biased.
Yeah.
Because it's people before profits. This
Yes.
country is made of people. It's not made of business. Business is made of people. The country is made of people. Government is made of people. Soylent Green is made of people. This is why I'm on the left. You summed it up, Pat. That's it.
Guys, it's been a fairly emotional end to the show. I feel like I want to just take the dog for a walk now. Maybe I will. Oh, I said the W word. All right, guys. Listen, yeah, this is why I sit on the left. We are talking to people constantly about getting involved with media stuff out there. And I had a meeting with someone today, and I said, we overtly, if you're watching us right now and you think, oh, look at this bias, we sit on the left, right? We sit on the left. Chewy and I last year put out our political compasses. We don't hide it. There are some other internet broadcasters at the moment who do hide it. They try and sell the fact that they're fair and balanced. They're not. They sit on the far right. We're honest with where we sit. We know where our perspective comes from, right? We know where we sit. So we can speak openly and honestly, and we can also call a spade a spade. We've been very critical of the left. And part of the reason we've been critical of the left is they're not doing a fucking good enough job. And they screwed it up last time, and they let these assholes get through who are getting to a point where they're going to cancel fucking support for teenagers who are going to commit suicide. I'm disappointed in you left. I'm disappointed in Labour for that, for what happened. Yeah. Drop the ball. And you
we want the left to get angry, to get a bit of mongrel in them, to actually get on the barricades and fight. And there are certainly some on the left that are, but we need them all to be doing it.
And when we criticise and critique the left, there's an old adage about iron sharpening iron, right? You want a bit of this, you want a bit of pull your fucking socks up, guys. You want a bit of this. We've had it. We've been told to pull our socks up by some other people on the left, and we've taken it on board. Others need it as well. Anyway, let's not go into a proselytizing last 20 minutes about how the left must do better. But the left must do better. Because much like we were talking about the responsibility Newsroom had for the demise of Newsroom, there is the responsibility for the fucking left, especially the ones that wear red, for the demise of the left, especially the ones that wear red.
Point of order, yes. News Hub, not the Newsroom. Newsroom's still going. You said
whatever.
Newsroom.
Whatever. I'm drunk. I'm drunk on my own rant. Someone writing about my rants tonight. There you go. Fair enough. All right, guys. We're gonna piss off now, and I might go see if my fiance is still up.
Oh, your fiance!
I used the word.
Well, my wife is in England, so I'm going to play Helldivers 2 for the next 2 hours.
My wife. Yeah,
my wife.
Now, when you say wife, you mean your mother, in whose basement you're sitting in?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
All right, team, you're all beautiful. We will see you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Be safe, be well. Come back tomorrow night, bring a friend. Hooroo.
Cheers, fam.